to welcome everybody to our first Owensboro Area World Affairs Council event of 2021. We're very excited tonight. My name is Angela Ash and I am president of the Owensboro Area World Affairs Council. I have that honor. Let me also take the opportunity to remind you all to please sign in using the Google form. Mr. Matt Mansour, our beloved treasurer and valued board member, will be adding that link to the chat section of our presentation this evening. So if you wouldn't mind to take a minute to sign in with your name, email, and how you heard about the program, we'd really appreciate that. Plus, that will give you the opportunity to be added to our mailing list so that you don't miss programs like this. I wanted to remind everybody that our mission as an organization is to advance global understanding in our community. And while we certainly miss our in-person presentations, I for one certainly do, we aren't letting the pandemic prevent us from providing quality programs. And in fact, it's interesting that the situation has actually afforded the opportunity to provide some really wonderful remote programs, such as the one we're about to have here this evening. And I want you to know that our board is working really hard to put together some really great programs, like Mr. Morton Holbrook, who doesn't really enjoy a lot of acclaim and appreciation. He gets embarrassed, but I do want to point out that Mr. Holbrook is the one that put the program together tonight. So I want to give him his due. We appreciate his work, and we just are so blessed. We're so fortunate to have a bunch of hardworking board members that feel as passionate as many of us do about advancing global understanding and all these really important major world issues. So tonight we are honored to have the Consul General of France, Guillaume Lacroix, with us this evening, who is presenting remotely from one of my favorite cities, Chicago. And Mr. Guillaume Lacroix became Consul General of France in Chicago on August 29th, 2017. And he oversees the relations between France and 13 US Midwestern states. And that includes, of course, our Commonwealth of Kentucky. In fact, we were discussing a few minutes before the program how he has visited various areas of Kentucky, but never our beloved Owensboro. So we've resolved that we will remedy that as soon as the pandemic subsides. So absolutely, Mr. Lacroix, you have an extended open invitation to come and visit Owensboro at any point in time. We'd love to have you. And Mr. Lacroix became Consul General of France in Chicago on August 29, 2017, as I said. But he has an amazing pedigree and has traveled extensively and has a really amazing resume. He holds diplomas from the Institute of Political Studies and the Law School of Assas, I hope I pronounced that correctly, at the University of Paris. He is fluent in Swahili, which is something else that we were discussing prior to the program. You're probably the first person that I've met, sir, that is fluent in Swahili. That's fantastic. And this language he studied at the Institute of Oriental Languages in Paris, but he also used it in the field, particularly on the islands of Zanzibar in East Africa. And he started his diplomatic career in 1997, and he was assigned to the Bureau of African Affairs at the headquarters in France. Then, of course, to the French Embassy in Tanzania. Very impressive. And in 2005, he joined the French Embassy in Washington, D.C. And he was also posted in 2 other diplomatic institutions, at the US State Department as part of an exchange program, and at the European External Action Service in Brussels. And from 2013 to 2017, he served in the cabinets of French foreign affairs ministers as counselor for African affairs. So it is our privilege to have him speak for us this evening. So please join me in welcoming Consul General Guillaume Lacroix.
Thank you very much, Angela. Thank you so much for the invitation, the introduction, and the opportunity to have this remote conversation. I should be starting by regretting that I didn't get a chance yet to visit Owensboro, and I am responsible for that. I should have taken the opportunity of one of my visit to the Commonwealth of Kentucky or to Indiana. I've been to Evansville to cross the Ohio River and come to see you. But since I've been invited, we will do that, and I very much look forward to it. I have had the chance to stay several times in Kentucky. It's great to be the consul in Chicago, but I wouldn't mind if the consulate were located in Kentucky, not only because of the climate, but also because the food is excellent. And I don't want to mention here the drinks, but the food is really, really excellent. And I happen to be a Kentucky colonel. I was made a colonel by the governor of Kentucky. I happen to be an honorary Hoosier as well. So I don't know if I can call Kentucky home, but I very much enjoy my time here as the Council of France in the Midwest and in Kentucky. 12 states in the Midwest and the Commonwealth of Kentucky. My responsibility as the council is to, I'm a career diplomat, as you said. My responsibility as the council is to first to look after the French community, to lead the French community, to provide services to the French citizens in the entire region, the jurisdiction of the consulate. The French community is about 25,000 people. Some of them have dual citizenship, French-American citizenships, and the majority are French citizens, so they need to come to the consulate to renew their passports, their IDs, the documents. We help them when they need to, for some reason, connect with the authorities in France, driving licenses, and a number of administrative services. And in the context of the pandemic, it is our number one, number two, number three priority, not to provide treatment, not to provide medical services to the community, but to ensure that they are up to speed and they know everything about the rules that exist in France regarding the prevention against the pandemic, the rules regarding the travels, and maybe we will get back to that in the Q&A session. The borders are closed, and they are not closed for the French citizens. The French citizens who need to go back to France or want to go back to France, they can do it, but under certain conditions. We also make sure that the French either living or visiting the region are very much aware of the local rules. It is important for the French community to behave in an appropriate manner and respect the law of the land, and there are many laws these days, a lot of change in the rules and regulations, and that's not easy. So that's very, very important. And throughout the past year, 2020, the consulate has remained not open, because at some points we had to close, but remains operational, and we've been working remotely. But the second main task and mission of the consulate is to promote the connections, the links between my country, France, and your communities. The economy, the business, scientific partnerships, tourism. We welcome you guys to France when the borders reopen. Study abroad programs, all things that we believe that when we work together, we are better, we are stronger, and we can benefit from working together. And it is an old story, but a story that is not at all outmoded, the story of France and America. France played a role in helping America become what it is today, an independent country. Started with the War of Independence, with Lafayette, and Louis XVI, our king, who gave his name, or his name was taken by the population in Kentucky to start a city called, in my country, Louisville. In your area or in some areas of Kentucky, Louisville or something like that. But I understand there is an existing debate about regarding the pronunciation. By the way, there is a statue of Louis XVI in the city center of Louisville, and it's been in the middle of a little bit of turmoil recently. We don't take side. It's a statue that belongs to you. That was a gift given by the sister city of Louisville, Montpellier, to Louisville in the 60s, I believe. But we're watching the fact that the Commonwealth of Kentucky has always had historic links with France. Bourbon County, Bourbon is the name of the dynasty of the French. That was before the French Revolution, of course, and that brings us back to the War of Independence. But you also have Versailles, Kentucky. What you call Versailles, we call it Versailles. And I have had the opportunity to drive from Louisville to Lexington. I guess that at some point you see a sign, Versailles, a brown sign, Versailles Historic District. I guess the historic district of Versailles is a bit different from the historic district of Versailles. But to make a long story short, I think it shows the fact that our friendship, our alliance, and we are America's oldest ally, have strong roots and very vivid and dynamic roots. It is important as a Council of France in your region, not just to brag about our alliance, to brag about the fact that we invested, not me, my ancestors, in the future of America, but also to express very clearly on behalf of the French population the gratitude that we have for you. You came to change everything and the course of history in 1917 during World War I, and we will never forget that. And you came in 1944, and that is a moment of history that not only makes you proud, and the landing in Normandy is the biggest landing ever in the history of mankind. But for us, it means not just a gigantic military operation. It means saving who we are and saving our country. I am the grandson of two World War veterans, and the environment where I was raised, America was never far away. I didn't get a chance to visit America when I was a kid, but I know so much about you because I was raised again in the gratitude that we have, and I'm doing the same with my children. We will never forget that. And I'm mentioning it because I had the honor in 2019, about a year and a half ago, to commemorate in Louisville with more than 120 World War II veterans in one hall, the memory of D-Day. And this is something very, very special that I will always keep in my mind and in my heart. It says so much about who we are together as France and America. Of course, history is a process. You have become a very big, very powerful country. We remain who we are, but in relative terms, we are not as powerful as we were two centuries ago. And that is one of the reasons why we care so much for our partnership. Not only that you came to save us, but also because we believe in the future of the trade that exists between our two countries. right now you may not know it, but France is one of the largest investors, not the French government, but French companies in Kentucky. I will try to find a way to share you this with this information. It is a kind of summary of the bilateral trade relations, but also investment relations between France and Kentucky. And I can see on this document that more than 11,000 jobs have been created in Kentucky by French companies. And that's quite significant. It means that France is number 3 for jobs created by foreign companies in Kentucky. And you may see that there are French companies everywhere in Kentucky. And that's very important, because this is about today and tomorrow. It is also, I believe, a demonstration that we are complementary. If you look at the aeronautic sector, for example, with the French company Safran and GE Aviation, this has been a fantastic success story since the 70s. They are located in Kentucky, a little bit in Ohio and Kentucky. And it is amazing to see how, even in the context of the economic crisis, the business is not as good as it was, but there is hope that it will recover. And while we welcome the conducive business environment that exists in Kentucky, we welcome you to come to us, to France, and visit us, visit Paris, visit the Beaujolais region, visit Burgundy region, my region, visit the Riviera, and come and see Notre Dame as it is being rebuilt, but also come to invest in France. And there are big companies from Kentucky that do business in France, that are located in France, and are increasing their businesses in France. And it is very important, because more investment coming from Kentucky to France means more jobs and more sustainable jobs, because we are allies. So not only we are business partners, but we are also allies, which means that sometimes we can be competitors, but most of the time we are able to understand one another. We are able easily to trust one another. And if we have some differences, let's have our differences resolved, but through dialogue, through trust, mutual trust. And I think that's the difference. If you do business with allies, it's easier and it's more long-term. And that is why we want to promote that with you. And the numbers are quite interesting. Of course, I'm talking about numbers pre-COVID-19, but the investment coming from America to France have been growing and growing, to the point that in 2019, and it started in 2018, America was number 1 in terms of foreign investment to France, even higher than Germany. Long story short, France is a country that is committed to economic reforms. You have seen that President Macron, since his election, has a very bold agenda of economic attractiveness, of economic reforms, and trying to make your life, when you come to France, easier for investments. In the context of Brexit, it's probably even more interesting, and that is why we are so keen to have you, but also in the context of the European construction and the European integration. France and Germany are more and more in sync, more and more taking initiatives to make our big market, or great market, that is even larger than the US market, a market that is good for business, but also in Europe have an area that is more and more homogeneous, even if we maintain our cultural differences, and that is relevant to the world. Being allies does not mean that we are always aligned. We may differ. We may differ on regulations. We may differ on the social model. We may differ sometimes on policy orientations. With the past administration in America, we had strong differences when it came to climate, the climate agenda. We had some differences when it came to trade, and quite substantial differences with regard to the way we approach international relations. We strongly believe in cooperation. We believe in multilateralism. We believe in, talking and trying to lead by example when it's possible. It's not always possible, but as much as we can. And in that context, of course, it is not the role of France, the consulate, the embassy, to take side in the elections. We have been following very closely, because that's also part of my responsibility, is to provide political analysis to the ambassador in Washington, D.C., to my capital in Paris. And Kentucky was probably not at play, but Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, very interesting areas to follow. But what I would like to end this first part with is to highlight that with the new president in new administration in Washington, D.C., President Macron and Europeans in general are very keen to resume not only dialogue, because dialogue existed before, but try to find areas where we can have a common agenda. We very much welcome United States coming back to the Paris Climate Accord. This is not an accord that belongs to France just because it's called Paris. It belongs to the world, but it is a matter of engagement for the French and Europeans in general to keep our commitment and to make sure that the planet that we will hand over to our children and grandchildren remains livable, and that's a big challenge. But we also welcome the first signs given by the new administration regarding the global governance. It will be very, very important, and the next few months will be very critical to make sure that in the context of the pandemic, everyone on this planet have the right to have an access to the vaccine. And if you leave it only to the markets, there may be some countries or some categories of population that will have an easy access, and some other will be left behind. That's not how we see it, and we hope that through cooperation, when it comes to economic recovery, when it comes to scientific cooperation, when it comes to access to the vaccine and medication, we will be able, within the framework of United Nations or within other multilateral framework, be able to work together. Being pro international cooperation, being pro UN does not mean that we are weak. We have to be very much aware, and we are aware of the challenges. There are countries, there are groups, there are people on this planet who doesn't share our common agenda. The agenda of democracy, the agenda of the rule of law, the agenda of playing by the rules. And the ones who think that democracies are weak make big mistakes. They make a big mistake in the 30s and in the 40s, and if they do the same mistake here, they will see the price. That is why our military, our security alliance, our common values are so important. We want to work together, Paris and Washington. And the title of this topic is Neighbors, and we are neighbors in history, we are neighbors in geography, but we are allies. But the relations between France and United States is not only about Paris and Washington. It's about Kentucky and France. It's about Kentucky and Normandy. It's about Kentucky and Burgundy, my home region. It's about Louisville and Deauville, the sister city, and Montpellier, the sister city. It's about Lexington and Deauville. It's about Owensboro and France. It's about Paris, Kentucky, and Paris, France. And that is what I think makes the essence and the the passion of being the French consul in this region. I don't deal that much with the big diplomacy, but I deal with the diplomacy of the people-to-people connections, educations. We want to attract more students from Kentucky to France. Business, attract more business. People, more school exchanges, and try to also to help the ones in the education system who believe in the learning of foreign languages. You mentioned Swahili. I could mention France. I would like to see more young students in Kentucky learn French, not just because it's my language. It is also the language of Canada. It's the language of Haiti. It's the language of many countries in Africa, countries in Asia, in the Pacific, everywhere. French is the only language with English that is actually spoken on all continents. All these trends that we would like to expand when they are good and mitigate when they are not good. We recognize the challenge to operate in a financial crisis. So we have to be realistic with the objectives. But I hope that in the past 3 years since I was here, and I was not the first, we've been able to advance our agenda. And it's wonderful for me to be with you this evening. I hope I was not too long. I tried to highlight a few areas of my activities, my agenda that I would like to share with you, but also give some hooks for more questions and comments and suggestions. I'm very much open to new ideas because it's not here. We are stuck in our offices. We need to fresh our minds and to take this opportunity to listen more. And I want to listen to you. Thank you very much. I think you are on mute.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Lacroix. So folks, for those of you that would like to ask questions to Mr. Lacroix, you can do that in the chat function off to the right. Please do so. But we do have some questions that have been sent in advance. And so I'll start with some of these questions while folks are thinking about what they might like to ask. And so I'll just start at the top here with the questions that were sent in earlier. And the first one is pretty straightforward here. How did you first enter Foreign Service? And then would you take a moment to just describe the position responsibilities as Consul General? You're muted.
I joined the Foreign Service in 1997 after my studies, my education, and after a long-term stay in East Africa, in Tanzania, where I did a little bit the equivalent of the Peace Corps. We call it coopération in France, and I worked at the Alliance Française of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and also at the embassy. And after, at the end of my tour, I was convinced that I thought I should try my chance to join the Foreign Service. It's a very competitive examination, so I was not sure. I don't come from a family that lived in Paris, and there was no diplomat in my family. My two parents were high school teachers in the French Midwest, and when you live in a rural area, you may choose to stay, or you may you may want to fulfill your dreams. And I dreamt of going far away, including Africa, and that's how I ended up being a diplomat. Being a career diplomat means that at some point in your career, you can become a consul, and maybe later you can become an ambassador. The difference between a consul and an ambassador is that an ambassador is the representative of the president in the capital cities. So in the United States, there is only one ambassador, Ambassador Philippe Etienne. in Washington, D.C., was appointed by the president to represent France in the entire United States in every aspect. But it's not enough to be located in Washington, D.C. In big countries, it is important to be present in big cities and try to cover with more accuracy and more proximity some other areas. That is the reason why, by tradition, by history, many countries have consuls and consular offices in cities like Shanghai, in cities like Cape Town or Istanbul, New York, Chicago, who are not capital cities. And that makes the job extremely attractive, because on the one hand, it's a very official position. I was appointed by the president too. But the good thing is that you work with a lot of autonomy. If you manage to have a relations of trust with your ambassador who is far away in Washington, D.C., you do whatever you want. It doesn't mean that you should do foolish things, huh? But it is a job where I can more or less be in control of my own agenda and schedule, and that's wonderful.
Can you talk a little bit about some of your most interesting duties as Consul General?
Yes, with pleasure. I think the most rewarding duty has been and will continue to be the opportunity and the humble honor to be the person who says officially, on behalf of the president, on behalf of the French people, thank you, sir, for your service during World War II. In 2021, there are less living World War II veterans than in 2020 and 30 or 40 years ago. In 2019, on June 6, 2019, I had the opportunity I was invited in Louisville to share a very special moment with more than 120 World War II veterans, Europe and Pacific, in one hall with a big band, and it was fantastic. And to be there and to share a few remarks, and I do it in my official capacity, but also as a son and father, and it means a lot. And I've had the honor to go and meet 3, I believe, World War II veterans in Kentucky, and to present them with my country's highest honor, the Medal of the Legion of Honor, and to pin the medal. It's fantastic. And it is not just about, a ceremony. It is an opportunity to meet the families. It is an opportunity to have the press and to do some public relations activity for the good, and that's wonderful. Some of the very interesting other interesting activities are all the very concrete things, because again, the job of the council is not so much to sit at a table and exchange notes with other diplomats talking about third countries or other problems. I don't spend much time in exchanging analysis. Sometimes we exchange a conversation with a beer or a whiskey. That I like it. But what I like even more is to visit the French companies in Kentucky, like Safran in just the across the river from Cincinnati, but also some other companies, and meet as well US headquartered companies that invest in France, visit factories, talk to people, sense a little bit how the market is. And that is very interesting because that is very concrete. The other things that I find very interesting is to reach out to students in schools, elementary schools, high schools, and of course college and universities, to get a chance to talk about like the conversation we are having, to talk about what my job is, but more importantly, what France does in the United States. What I think is quite important to have in mind is that we want to remain relevant to you. It is not just that we should think that French-American relation is a given because we are all allies. No, it has to be to have a meaning for 2021 and the decades to come. And that's maybe a little bit the difference of perspective between an ambassador and the embassy that is really dealing with a transatlantic agenda day by day, day after day, and the council that maybe have a little less pressure, little less political pressure, and take time to invest in education, invest in connections, invest in feel good activities, and focus on the communities, not just on the big cities, big companies, big names. It's not about name recognition or whatever. No, it's communities. To try to find a way to bring the French communities to your community, to Owensboro. That's what I like.
Thank you very much.
Even remotely.
Thank you. And I appreciate what you said about the relationship between the United States and France. I teach American history, and I really do emphasize the positive relationship that the US has had with France over the last 200 plus years. So I think that's very important. Next question, let's talk a little bit about international policy between the two nations. What do you perceive as the most important policy or issue between the United States and France? And then a follow-up here, what can the Biden administration do to improve relations with your country, with France?
I think security is very important. You know that we are faced with a very multi-dimensional threat, transnational networks of terrorists, jihadists, but threats that can be also as drug traffickers, international networks of criminalities, and sometimes countries that do not behave well and represent a threat in some particular region, like Iran in the Middle East, for example, or North Korea. But threats now are getting global, and so it is important for our two countries to remain to remain together, but work together. Have tried to have the same approach vis-à-vis the challenges in the coming years, so that we can work even more closely together. And of course, this is not a partnership that is limited to France and the United States. We include our NATO allies, we include the European Union, we include some other parts of the world. France has a historic connections with a number of African countries. And by historic, I do not mean only things that are inherited by our colonial past, but I'm also talking about issues of the day and of today and tomorrow. And we're working together, and it is good if we include America in the conversation, because we share the same values, and so together we are stronger. So security, diplomacy, because as we all know, diplomacy is a tool for peace, but it is also a tool for conflict prevention, and also a tool for global governance, which is not a very concrete term, but a tool for addressing collectively in a smart fashion, but also in a fair fashion, the new challenges. And that is why climate, I think, is very, very important. And the climate change agenda will be very, very high in the coming years between Paris and Washington, D.C. And it is obvious that this new administration is committed to have ambitious policies, and policies that are not necessarily, the liberals and the conservatives, the left and the right. No, it's there is a consensus in the business, a very strong trend in the business, the markets, to go more and more with toward the green economy. The carbon issue is very important, and so it is actually a process that's been mainly driven by private initiative, and we think that's good. But it's even better if the states and the countries do their part and work collectively to define the rules. And that is not always easy to define common rules, because we have different situations. We in France, for example, we try to have more and more rules at the level of European Union, but we have our own history, our own culture that may be different from the United States. If you look at the internet, for example, so many challenges coming from the social media. We believe it is important to have rules, and good rules. If Facebook or if Twitter decides to close down the account of the President of the United States of America, yes, there are good reasons for that. Maybe because there are some red lines that have been crossed, but at the same time, where do they get this right from? It raises many very fundamental questions. I don't want to see companies or big companies being more powerful than the Supreme Court, or be more powerful than states. So we have to work with them. But since they're getting bigger and bigger, we have to, and this is not a challenge for America or France, it's really a common challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Lacroix. And you've really anticipated the next question here. The question was, what are some of the most pressing issues for NATO at this time? I think you've already articulated some of that, but what would you say to Americans who question the relevance or value of NATO?
It is very important for Europe, because NATO is a prolongation of the US involvement in World War II, and I've mentioned that earlier. But it is also it is also about the security of Europe. Yes, the Cold War is over, but there are new forms of Cold War, as we all know, with Russia, and it is a particular relevance for the countries that belong to NATO and that are bordering Russia, that on some aspects can feel some form of pressure or threats. But as we all know, some threats do not have borders, and cyber security is a very important issue, and it's part of the transatlantic agenda. And also because if you have followed a little bit the news in Europe in the past months or years, Turkey and Greece, two NATO members, and it's not very recent, but there has been renewed tension. This remains problematic, but it has also implication for the rest of Europe, because Greece is a member of the European Union, and we have, as French, we have a strong solidarity with Greece as a member of the European Union, and on several issues we have had important differences of opinion, but also of approaches with Turkey. And it is important, we believe, that US plays all its role within NATO, because you are, I should not say that because I don't think it's diplomatic, but it's an image. You like the big brother, but in the good sense, and that's important. But I believe it's also important for America, because with a strong NATO and also a strong European Union, you have a partner to deal with. And an issue that has been on the table for several years, and it did not start with Trump administration, it started earlier under Obama, and maybe in some forms earlier. It's about the investments that each and every European country makes into its own defense industry and defense in general. And we recognize that European countries have to invest more in their defense. And we the French, we are a country that has a strong army, we are nuclear power, and we are investing. And so the more European countries will invest in their security, the better there will be a burden sharing between Washington and Europe. So it's important. These are very fundamental issues, and issues that have to do with the common values, but also some very concrete and strategic choice that have to be made by the individual capitals. But certainly we welcome the renewed interest in coming from Washington D.C. in being a key player in current discussions that relate to intra-European issues, but also that relate with the relations between Europe and its neighbors, Russia, Turkey, Africa. It's a small world, and so talking again about neighbors.
Excellent, thank you. We've got some questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and go through these just in sequential order here. The first is, are there cultural programs from your consulate involving Kentucky?
Yes, there are. There are not much programs per se run by the consulates, but because most of the programs that we are involved in are in partnership with universities, with the Alliance Française in Louisville or Lexington, and in education. I will send you, I'm not sure I will be able to do it with the chat, but I will send you later on the link to the webpage of the cultural services of the consulate, because it is a strong approach and policy of me and my team to expand as much as we can what maybe was done in the past more in Chicago, in big cities, and to be more visible in Kentucky, for example. So there are film festivals, movies, competitions sometimes, and also opportunities for future French teachers to be trained in France. And also again partnering with the network of the Alliance Française, that is a very not only good networks in the sense that they are everywhere, almost everywhere, but very dynamic, because again the francophonie, the French-speaking community is not just limited to France. It is a global community, and wherever there are French-speaking communities coming from Quebec, coming from Haiti, coming from Congo, coming from France, it's family, and this is the way we see it. And if in your group tonight there are some French speakers, some good French speakers, so less so good French speaker beginnings, it's not a problem. As long as you start learning French, you already have the French-speaking passport and you're part of the family.
Perfect. And you're very good at anticipating our questions here. So the next question is there an Alliance Française in or near Kentucky? You've already addressed that. I think you alluded to that a moment ago. But the next question here is, will Macron be able to institute economic reforms in France despite opposition from the Yellow Jackets and this word, I think I right, gilet jaunés.
Gilet jaune, yes.
Ah, sorry.
Jaune is the jacket, but it is a very good question. It is a question about France, but it is a question about the Western world in general. When I see the images of the capital being under attack by U.S. citizens, I think of the Gilets jaunes in France 2 years ago, because the same kind of attempts have been made. Not everything is equal, and then there are a lot of differences. But I think at the core of the reasons why there is this growing protest movement is the sense that what the sociologists call the lower middle class. I'm not so sure it's so accurate, but in areas of the society of our countries, sometimes rural, sometimes urban. It's not always rural, but families, communities feel a little bit as they are losing controls because their grandparents had to work hard, and the parents could go to college and get a job. And now it's harder for me to go to college and to get a job. And what about my children? So there was a kind of upward trend and now downward trend, and people tend to get less optimistic, even in the United States, which to me is by definition the country of optimism. You see some pockets of pessimism, and so I sense maybe that the rules of the games are not fair, or maybe they are fair for some people who succeed, and for me and my family they are unfair. And this elicits, in the context of economic hardship, a sense of injustice, and a sense to react. And if you don't trust your congressman and congresswoman, you unseat him and her. And if you don't see a difference, say, okay, what do I have left? To take the street and take the parliament or the capital in Frankfurt, or it happened in Lansing, Michigan, earlier last year, and as a kind of repetition for what happened in Washington. And that is bad, because this is not through violence, it is not through threats, it is not through sometimes racism and anti-Semitism that you will solve our problem. But it's one thing to say it, it's another to try to address the reality. And that is the approach that President Macron has taken after the Yellow Jacket movement and revolt, was to say, okay, we need to spend more time, and it was before the pandemic, spend more time to talk, to listen, to discuss, to let the steam off, and instead of shouting insults on the internet that sometimes translate into real violence, actual violence. Let's try to talk and engage for weeks and months in a national debate, national dialogue. We didn't need foreign mediations. We didn't need outside diplomacy, but try to engage. And in some aspects, it succeeded because it calmed down the situation. But of course, to find long-term solutions, it will take time. And the pandemic has added more challenges, because the debt is rising. More people are losing their jobs, so it would be very, very difficult. But the pace of reforms is still there. Between now and the presidential election in France in 2022, all the agenda, all the oxygen in the room will be taken by the pandemic. But still, the pro-reform agenda remains. There has not been, a coming back to the situation of before, and so we remain very much a country that is open to business, that tries to provide more opportunities for entrepreneurs, which, by the way, is a French word, entrepreneur. And actually, that is the solution, because we need more economic growth, more clean growth, more pro-climate take all the opportunities that are given by new investments in clean energies, but also new investments in new forms of allocating the resource on the map. All the resources should not stay in the big cities, and this divide, urban versus rural, that exists in the United States exists in France too. Again, I come from a rural area, and I feel myself very much committed to that, and that's really be quite important. In France, we have seen, like in the United States, the small towns kind of dying off because of Main Street no longer there, because of malls that go bigger and bigger. Okay, maybe that lowers the price of some commodities, but at the same time, you see Main Street decaying. That's very bad. It's bad for the moral, but it's bad because we are missing spaces for the community to join across the divides, and we are not just consumer pushing our carts in Walmart or elsewhere. We need, like our parents, grandparents used to do, is to play music together, to honor our veterans, our ancestors, our fathers and mothers, but also give the chance to small entrepreneurs. And the digital economy probably is an opportunity, but sometimes can also be a challenge when it comes to distribution and so on and so forth. And so that's why it is important for the governments, not just the federal or the national governments, but also the local governments, not to bring more regulations or taxes, but to help the sectors that need to be protected, especially the small and middle enterprises to thrive again, because that is and in France there's been debates about reopening post offices, because in many small towns in France, the only business that remains is the post office. So we need to keep them, but to give even more competencies to the post office, so that some services, public services, can be provided, that the bank services can be provided, and that is something that will take years. But through that, hopefully, we will see less mobs in the streets and threatening our democracy.
Thank you. Well, we are running up on the end of our time here, but I do have one last question for you, and it's a big one. So I don't know if you can boil this down to a couple of minutes, but let's try. So this last question is, how would you describe the state of affairs between Russia and France at this time? And the follow-up here is, have any leaders in France expressed interest in giving imprisoned Russian politician and activist Alexei Navalny the Nobel Prize?
President Macron is committed to having a continuing dialogue with President Putin. Right after his election, he invited President Putin to Versailles, France, not Versailles, Kentucky, for conversations, and we want to be constructive. When we disagree, we disagree. When we think red lines are crossed, we say it, and sometimes we respond with sanctions at the European level. But we recognize that Russia is a big country. It is a country that belongs to Europe and Asia, but this is a country that is affected by some of the evils that we are faced with, terrorism, pandemics, and so on and so forth. So there are areas for cooperation and working together. And also recognize that Russia in the 20th century, even if we don't share the communist ideology, but Russia, also liberated Europe in the beginning, and then it was less liberation, but they paid the price of blood in World War II, and this kind of very fundamental recognition, sometimes maybe the Russians feels like we tend to forget that. No, we should not forget that. When it comes to Mr. Navalny, France and Germany have worked very closely together. You know that Germany has rightfully hosted Mr. Navalny for his recovery. We are following very closely the developments there. Whether it should be given a prize, it's not for me to say. I read recently that some people make campaign for a Nobel Peace Prize, but at the same time says on some issues he has a kind of nationalist approach. So I don't know enough Russia. What I know is that he's a very courageous man, and we should also follow what has been happening in Belarus as well, huh? And to see how the population and the women in particular have been so much committed in demanding democratic reforms.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Lacroix. It's really been a pleasure. I believe Angela Ash is going to jump in here to wrap up our session today. And here she is.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Lacroix. This was such a wonderful presentation. I know I speak on behalf of all the attendees here this evening and the OAC board members. Thank you so much for your time. I want to, in particular, point out that our next program will probably take place towards the end of February. That is something actually that our board is still working on. I want to emphasize that if you would like to be on our mailing list, I would encourage you all to click on the link in the chat with the Google form to submit your name and your email address so that you can stay on our list. I look forward to meeting Mr. Lacroix in person, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening and stay safe. And we look forward to seeing you all at our next program. Have a good evening.
Nice
Thank
to
you
meet
very
sir.
much. I'm sharing my email address for the group on the chat right now.
Thank you.
Yes, it is.
And I also look forward to receiving that information. You had held up that little flyer that highlighted the locations in Kentucky where French businesses reside. I wouldn't mind receiving that also.
Okay.
Something that you could email to me, or I teach European history as well as world civilization. So I think this is something that I would really love to share with my classes.
Oh, thank you very much, Angela, and I will do that very shortly. Thank you very much for the opportunity, the invitation, and I hope to meet you in person in a not too distant future. I didn't bring my I don't have my Kentucky Colonel certificate. It is at home, but I have here something that says that the United States flag was flown over the capital of the Commonwealth of Kentucky in honor of Consul General Guillaume Lacroix, and was on November 2018. I came to Frankfurt to honor Mr. Pollard, a World War II veteran. He was, if I remember well, 99 years old when he received.
Oh, wow.
He passed away a few weeks after that, but we were glad that we were able to present the medal with his son, Mr. William Pollard Jr. It was wonderful. It was very moving.
That's fantastic. Wow, that's a wonderful story. I'm so glad that you've had that opportunity to interact with the Commonwealth. And I do hope that there's an opportunity for you to come and visit Owensboro. We would love to have you. And I'll be in touch with you about that. Once this COVID business is over, we can show you some of the sites. You know, that I'm myself not from Owensboro, but they're very, very excited to share with you bluegrass and bourbon, which you talked a little bit about with Morton, but also barbecue. They are very emphatic about being the barbecue capital of the world. That is something
that's what I love. And I didn't mention bluegrass, but I'm not a specialist, but I'm a huge bluegrass fan. I love banjo music. I love it.
Great. Well, we'll have to take you to the Bluegrass Museum because we have the International Bluegrass Museum here. So that'll be on our list of things to do.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Okay, you have a great evening. Thank you, everybody.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Merci. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Morton. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Morton. And thank you, Professor Oshbach and Mr. Mansour, for being our tech gurus. Thank you.
Glad to help.